I'm John Law, this is Chasing Cars, and this, as you can probably tell, is the new BMW 4 Series. Now, it was once quite a restrained, elegant vehicle, but BMW has seen fit for this latest G22 generation to drive a pretty significant wedge between it and its 3 Series brother. They've done that in a couple of ways, and we're going to start by talking about the styling before jumping inside and then taking it out for a spin on the road. Now, the first thing that you're going to notice about this new G22 4 Series is this front grille. It's caused a lot of debate, and to be honest, I'm not a big fan of it. I think it's a little bit in your face and a little bit, kind of unpleasant on the front of what is a fairly elegant car in the rest of its ways. But you can let me know what you think of the grille in the comment section down below, because definitely in this Tanzanite blue metallic, which is a nice dark color with the chrome surrounds, it definitely has less visual impact than it does in photos and on lighter colored cars. It's down the side profile as well, where BMW has really chosen to differentiate this 4 Series from its 3 Series brother. There's no more really intense crease line or speaker line down the side of this car. Instead, it's a wholly sort of more muscular, bulgy approach to design, which really does differentiate it from its 3 Series cousin. You've also got on this car 19-inch alloy wheels, which in this design are quite attractive in my opinion, and you get that size standard across the rest of the range. Now let's jump inside this 4 Series and see if the cabin is as extroverted and as out there as the exterior is. Now, inside the cabin of the new 4 Series is actually a whole lot more restrained and elegant than the exterior dimensions and design. It's very much, in fact, similar to its BMW 3 Series brother. And that means you get this really nice design, you get a broad sort of dash, although it's not quite as sort of high-tech or in your face as something from Mercedes-Benz or Audi. You do get this lovely oyster white leather as an option in this particular vehicle, 430i, which I think works really nicely with the dark outside color. Although with the tetrahedral finish, it's a little bit maybe not quite so well matched. We'd like to see a little bit of wood inside this, which would set it off really nicely. Anyway, down to technology, you get a 10.25-inch touchscreen here in front of you. It's really easy to access from the driver's seat, and it has the added benefit of being, one, a very responsive and easy to use touchscreen, and also you get the luxury of having a dial down here, a rotary dial like all BMW iDrive systems in the past, which means that when you're up on the move, you can really accurately do what you need to do. So I'm a big fan, and so is Tom, of this infotainment system. It's also just all very nicely laid out. You've got your aircon controls down here with nicely knurled sort of bezels and all that sort of stuff, and your shortcut buttons you can set to do whatever you need down here. And you've got your general control center here, which houses the gear stick and all these other goodies, so drive modes and a couple of other adjustment buttons. Ahead of you, you've got a 12.3-inch digital driver's display, which BMW doesn't do this as well as other brands. It doesn't give you that much customizability, and it's just a generally low contrast situation. You can see the maps and navigation on there, but it's not quite as in your face as, again, something from the other manufacturers this is in competition with. You've also got a really chunky steering wheel. Although this isn't as chunky as in the full-blown M cars, it's actually not too bad, although maybe that's just BMW widening and widening things so we get used to it. You've got nice paddles on the back of the steering wheel too, and in general, everything just feels really nicely screwed together and like it's hewn from solid. It's really pleasant in here, and it feels like it's going to last a long time. You've also got the added convenience of ambient lighting in this comfort pack equipped example, and an opening sunroof, which are both nice little things, although they do bring the price of this car up pretty significantly. So where the 430i retails for about 80 grand, this one here is $100,000 pretty much before it goes on the road. So not the cheapest proposition in the world. Now, as for the back seat, this is a coupe. I'm not really going to embarrass myself by jumping in the back seat, but I have tried it, and the 57mm lower roofline than on the 3 Series definitely cuts into headroom for someone like me who's 6'2", so best kept for emergencies, maybe a little dog or younger passengers in the back seat. As for practicality, well, it's not hugely rosy here in the 4 Series. You do have some bins in the doors, which are a good size for a smaller bottle, and you've also got these cup holders under this covered section here, where you've also got wireless phone charging as well. They're not great if you've got a tall thing, because they then impede the general usage of here. And actually, while we're on wireless topics, the wireless phone charging is complemented by standard wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is included now for free across pretty much every BMW, which is a great touch and means you don't have to worry about plugging your phone in all the time when you get in. There's also a decently sized center bin under this nice padded armrest with a rubberized mat and a USB-C charging point in there. So all in all, the 4 Series interior is a pretty nice place to be, if a little bit more restrained than the exterior would suggest. Now let's hop around to the boot and see what kind of practicalities await us there. Now around the rear here of the 4 Series is probably its best angle. That rear 3/4 is a really nice classic coupe line, and it definitely has a little bit more BMW character back here than perhaps around the front. Now under the boot of this 430i, which is an electrically powered item, which seems pretty unnecessary on a vehicle like this, which would have a really light boot, but still it's part of the comfort package, which gets you that sunroof. Now back here you've got 440 litres of cargo space, and you've also got a nice little sort of nettings off to the side there, but really it's just a nice big space to store plenty of stuff. You've got more than enough space to store stuff for a weekend away or the regular shopping run that you'd be doing in this sort of car, which is, yeah, it's nice. It's a really daily usable coupe, which some of BMW's 2-door options are not so much like the Z4, and that's what the point of this 4 Series is now. So let's take this 4 Series out on the road and see what it's like to drive. So we're out here in the Blue Mountains around Sydney testing this 4 Series and seeing what it's all about. And I know we talked a lot about the design differences between this car and its 3 Series brother, but there's also quite a few changes under the skin that you might not know about if you hadn't been doing your research. So the 4 Series has the same lineup of engines here in Australia. You get a choice of 3 petrol engines, no diesels are coming here at all. And we're driving the mid-spec one, which is the 430i, which is going to take up the most of the share of BMW 4 Series sales here in Australia. And it's a really nice engine. It's a BMW B48 2-litre turbocharged unit, and it punches out 190 kilowatts and 400 newton meters, both of which are very respectable outputs and work nicely with this car. And this car's up on its predecessor by 50 newton meters and about 5 kilowatts compared to the F32 4 Series. You can also get the 420i, which is theoretically going to be the next biggest seller, and that puts out 135 kilowatts and 300 newton meters. That's also decent, and there's no real worry about that being the undersold, sort of underpowered variant in the range that no one wants, like perhaps it was in the past. So both of them are pretty decent, and yeah, it's just a really nice powertrain, really usable, really nicely sort of spread of torque curve and power. There's not heaps of power left at the top of the rev band, but it's absolutely adequate. Now above this there's the M440i xDrive, which is powered by a twin-scroll turbo 3-litre straight 6, which is the ultimate BMW engine, and that produces 285 kilowatts and 500 newton meters, and that's a whole lot more, and we've spent a little bit of time in that car as well, and it's a really lovely powertrain, but frankly it's a lot of power for a standard chassis of a 4 Series. Not to say it's overpowered, but the fact that most people will end up choosing the 430i is probably the right decision. Now this 430i over the 420i does get adaptive dampers as well, although the passive dampers are absolutely nothing to be sniffed at. So if you're going to be buying a 420i, I wouldn't bother opting to option this set of adaptive dampers. The comfort mode is a little bit softer than the standard passive setup, and then the sports mode is a little bit firmer. Neither of them are too firm or too soft. It breathes really nicely with the road in comfort, this car, and then dial it up to sport when you want a little bit more response and a little bit more sort of verve to your drive. Now we're going to talk about how this car in general has more response than the 3 Series. So at the front axle, BMW has increased the camber, negative camber, by 1.5 degrees, which is pretty significant. That's something you'd see done on something like a track car, for example. And it means the front end's just that little bit more darty, a little bit more gripped up in this car than the 3 Series, and it just feels, yeah, it feels good. It feels like it suits the character of a coupe a little bit more. As for the other bits that have changed, obviously this car is a whole lot lower. As a driver, I've got decent headroom even with this panoramic glass sunroof, but it's 21 millimeters lower in its center of gravity than the 3 Series. Now, if you drove those back to back, I'm sure you'd feel it, but it has been a little bit since I've been in 3 Series, but I'm sure that that does help the feeling of that extra crisp turn-in from that camber. There's also generally stiffer suspension mounting points. So it's a really lovely companion on a back road, and it's a very fluid car. It just feels so classic in its BMW responses. You turn it in and you can feel the front end just a whiff of push before getting on the throttle to neutralize it and drive out of the corner with perhaps a little bit of attitude, but that's up to how much accelerator you use. Now the M440i does have an X-Drive system, whereas this car is rear-wheel drive only. The car we're in at the moment doesn't have the optional LSD, but I would probably suggest that that is a good choice in a car like this. It just gives you a little bit more control and a little bit more ability to put the power down. And yeah, it's just such a lovely car to drive. It's really different from the exterior personality of this car, which is so divisive. But really, when you get inside the 4 Series Coupe, you're going to realize that it is a nice car to drive, and everything they've done to differentiate it from the 3 Series is good. However, every time you adjust your drive modes down here, so Sport, Comfort and Eco Pro, which give you different steering settings and all that sort of stuff, you get to see the front of the 4 Series, which I think is a bit of a shame. But I mean, of course they had to do that. So yeah, it's a better car to be inside of than to be looking at, in my opinion. And if you want to know my perfect drive setup for this car, I've actually configured Sport Individual to have Sport engine response and Sport dampers and Sport transmission response. I have it in manual, and I leave the steering in Comfort, because in Sport, the steering just feels a little bit overly claggy and heavy without any reason. So that's my ideal setup for this 430i at least. Now, as for general build quality, as in the interior section I said, the real incredibly good fit and finish in this vehicle carries through to when you're out on the road. The noise, vibration and harshness is pretty well suppressed. Even in this rainy Sydney day that we've got here, it's all nice and quiet in the cabin, and you can just cruise along and relax and yeah, listen to your music, and it's great. Now, as for safety features, the base model 420i isn't actually hugely well equipped. It's got AEB and parking sensors at the rear, but you don't get adaptive cruise control as standard, which is going to be a little bit annoying if you're using the car for a lot of freeway Ks. You got to go for the 430i or the technology package that nets you that as an extra little costly option on the 420i. So keep that in mind. Now, on this 430i, you do get a 360-degree camera with all sorts of camera angles as well. So safety is good from the 430i upwards, but the 420i is probably lacking something that needs to be optioned onto it by the final buyer. So all in all then, the 4 Series is a really complete vehicle to drive on the road, and it just feels exactly like a BMW should, just a little bit sharper than the 3 Series, which is not the same that can be said for the exteriors. So, as the rain starts to fall here in beautiful Sydney on the Australian 4 Series launch, what are our thoughts on this vehicle? This new coupe is really eager to tell you it's not the 3 Series' brother. There's a whole load of styling cues, and the way it drives suggests that it's a much sharper and more focused car without being a full-fledged M car. As for the engine choices, the 430i is going to take the lion's share of sales here in Australia, and that's pretty reasonable because it's the only 4 Series available with rear-wheel drive with a limited slip differential, so it really is the driver's example, and it keeps it nice and light over the nose. The M440i is a great Grand Tourer and fast weapon for country cruising, but our pick is the 430i. But of course, we'd love to know what you think of the new 4 Series in the comments section down below, and while you're down there, you can hit subscribe and that bell icon. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.